There we go. What is usually known as Thursdays with Ron, I am Tommy Wallach. I'll actually put my full name in here. And I am sitting in for Ron today. He could not make it. And there's joy about probability. Jason, I'm glad to see the excitement. I'll also put my email address up here in case you need it for something at some point. Feel free to email me anytime about anything we talk about today or any other time. So, you know, putting together, I've filled in for Ron once before, and I just did a big sort of sentence correction overview. You know, basically I get a huge list of questions from people and just kind of pick stuff. And everything I have here is something that got asked about more than once, is pretty much what it comes to. There were a lot of sort of meta questions about how to study. Maybe we'll have some time at the end to talk about that, but that's sort of more general. And then there are some specific questions from the book, just so it's clear. I'm not allowed, for copyright reasons, to discuss any official guide questions. So I can talk about Manhattan questions, and I in fact have a bunch of Manhattan questions lined up to use as examples for various things. But just so you know, if you have a specific question about something in the OG, we won't be talking about stuff like that today. So just as an overview, I got asked a couple of times about sentence correction, verb tense specifically. A lot of questions about sentence correction overall, but I don't want to cover just what I covered last time, so I'm not going to do a big sentence correction overview. But I will talk about verb tense, and we can maybe go into a little bit more detail on some of the vagaries, the details of verb tense. After that, I got asked about some probability stuff. A few people had questions, particularly around something that some people know as the 1 minus x trick. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that and what it means, as well as probability overall. Then a few people actually asked me about essays. And again, I don't want to waste too much time on essays because of their relative importance on the test. But because it got asked, I figure I would just give you all very briefly my recommended outline for the 2 essays, just so you know exactly what you should do. And then with whatever time we have, we can get as deep as possible into critical reasoning, which a fair number of people asked about. So that is the plan for today. Really quickly, give me a smiley face if you have used Illuminate before, this platform we are on right now. Okay, it looks like about half the room. So just very, very quickly, I want to teach you how it works. Over here is where polling results are. You see there should be an A, B, C, D, and E. That's how I'm going to ask you to answer questions. Please do not answer them in the chat window. The chat window down here is for asking various other questions. Feel free to ask anything you want in that chat window. But when I ask you to answer a question, use A, B, C, D, E. To the left of that are some emoticons, like a smiley face, a frowny face. I might ask you for those at some point. To the left of that is a little hand with a green arrow upwards. That is how you raise your hand. You should do that if you have a question that is very specific, particularly if you want to come on the microphone to ask it. This is a one-way microphone system, sort of like a walkie-talkie, meaning when I'm talking, I cannot hear you, and when you're talking, you cannot hear me. For me to give up the microphone, I would hit this button down here. So everybody take a look at the bottom left corner of the screen where the microphone is when I give it up. So it should look like that. It should go basically pushable, and then you can push it and talk on the mic, and when you're done, you can click it again. So that's the basics of the room. Any other questions, anything comes up? Also, briefly, just so you know, I'm Tommy. I've been with the company for about 1.5 years now. I worked for the Princeton Review for a couple years before that. I teach the GMAT and a lot of the GRE. I wrote part of our GRE books, very exciting stuff. I live in San Francisco, where it is nice and foggy, though I can see the ocean from my apartment, so I am not complaining. So that's what's going on for me. I'm just gonna. I'm not Ron. I know. Ron's amazing, right? We all love Ron, but I'm happy to fill in for his big shoes. Okay. So let's talk about verb tense a little bit. Verb tense, not the single most important category in sentence correction. I wouldn't say it comes up the most, but it's a fairly easy one to technique, though there are some complications that we want to make sure that we are on the lookout for. So first we start here with the 5 major tenses. Let me move those down a little bit. We've got the simple present, I walk to the store. We use that for actually both the present and for stuff that is done consistently, right? I walk to the store every day, for example. Simple past, I walked. Simple future, I will walk. Then we've got these 2, the present perfect formed with has, have, and the past participle, and the past perfect formed with had and the past participle, right? So notice that the present perfect has 2 forms, a different one for singular and plural, whereas the past perfect does not. In other words, you would say, he has gone to the store, or you would say, they have gone to the store. but you would say he had gone to the store, and you would say they had gone to the store. Does anyone know what these two special tenses are used for? What about the present perfect? Can anyone describe to me what the present perfect is for in the chat window? I'd like to get a lot of people talking in the chat window, by the way, so you should kind of have your cursor down there as sort of a default. So that's the white box down here where it says send to this room. Anybody know what the present perfect is used for? Started in past, continuing, says here in Daria. Action started in the past and continues into the present. Very good. Present perfect, started past, and continues into present. What about the past perfect? What's that used for? Before past and then still past. Yeah, a lot of people putting it up there. Earlier action, action that started, finished. I'll say this way: action that finished in the past before another past action. Right? So before another past action. That's what the past perfect is for. And if we kind of look at these tenses, you know, all at once, just to sort of get a feel for it. If I say I ate 10 hot dogs, we don't know what happened after that. I could have eaten more, I could have gone to the store, who knows, right? If I say I have eaten 10 hot dogs, do you all see that that brings us up to the present? In other words, I haven't eaten any more. I have eaten 10 hot dogs. There's no way I could simultaneously have eaten 10 and have eaten 11, right? It's got to be one or the other. If I say I had eaten 10 hot dogs, it implies that I ate more later, or at least did something later, right? I had eaten 10 hot dogs, and then I ate more, and then I was hit by a bus, right? Or whatever else would happen from there. So that's kind of a slight difference in feel there on the meanings of those tenses. The major verb tense rules when you're dealing with sentence correction, fairly simple. I should add here, just because I didn't put it here, identification is huge for me on everything in the GMAT. The way that you get good at the GMAT is you learn to identify what type of issue you're looking at, because then you can apply all the brilliant techniques that you've learned in your studies. But if you don't identify first, you can't apply. So the identification for verb tense is changes in tense of one verb. In other words, if you have two verbs in two different tenses, that's not a big deal. But if you have one verb that is changing tense, has gone, had gone, went, has gone, had gone in the answer choices, you know that you're dealing with a verb tense split. Give me a smiley face if you have read through our books or taken our class, Manhattan's I mean, or any class. Okay, so not everybody, actually, a lot of people not. So just to throw this out there, a lot of the way that we deal with sentence correction is by using what are called splits, which is where you look vertically for some kind of difference that you can focus in on. And what I'm saying is that verb tense as an issue will generally appear very visibly in the splits. It's not a hard one to find because one verb is going to be changing tenses. Now, if the sentence is harder, that verb might not be in the same place physically in all 5 answer choices. You may need to look around for it. But if it's changing tense, you're looking at a verb tense issue. So the first rule, simplicity is best. Only use those perfect tenses when you absolutely have to. If you can stick, glad to hear it, Dinesh. If you can stick to the simple present, simple past, simple future, that's always best. Second, consistency is best. Okay? And I'm going to relate this to number 3. Let me go on to rule 3, and then I'll sort of relate it backwards. No verb tense is inherently wrong. In other words, I can say, I went to the store, I will go to the store, I am going to the store, etc. Right? None of those are inherently wrong. What makes a verb tense wrong is that it's used out of context. It is the wrong tense based on other verbs in the sentence. So in order to do verb tense questions correctly, you very often need to look to the other verbs. In fact, I would say you always need to look to the other verbs in the sentence to give you context. Okay? So we come back to number 2, consistency is best. What that means is that when you're doing what I just said to do, looking around the sentence for context, for other verbs, for whatever, you want to stay in the same tense as what you've seen already unless you have to. So only change tenses when you have to change tenses. Otherwise, stay with what you've already got there. Does that make sense? Everybody cool? Basically, verb tense questions will almost never have only one verb because what makes them tick is multiple verbs. Okay? No questions? All right, good. Okay, I'm going to just throw up a couple questions then. So I'm going to give you all a minute 15, then pull in your answer A, B, C, D, E. That's a minute 15, which is about how long I think these questions deserve. If everyone could please pull in, use the ABCD under the window. By the way, if this underline appears in the wrong place or anything like that, I unfortunately can't deal with all of the sort of vagaries of Illuminate. So for some people there might be scaling issues. I apologize, but there really isn't much I can do that I know of to fix that. So hopefully it was made clear. Okay, I'm still missing a lot of people in the polling, but I'll start talking about it. We seem to be divided mostly between two answer choices, which is not surprising here. But what I want to talk about here more than anything is process. Like, yes, this question is a little bit difficult. It's got sort of, a little bit of trickiness to it. Oh, and people, please don't move anything. You all have the power to move boxes. Please do not move them, unfortunately. If you need to scroll around, then do that or ask me a question about what's underlined. But don't move it around. Okay, cool. So let's talk about process for verb tense. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look here and we're going to say, okay, having had, he had, has had, these look like verb tense issues, right? These are verb tense issues, which means we're going to apply our verb tense technique. And you may remember from what I said on the previous slide that means we're going to need to look to other verbs. We need to look for the other verbs to tell us what to do. So where's another verb here? Opted, right, opted out or just opted, right? What tense is opted? Nice highlighting. I like the highlighting. Yeah, it's just a simple past, right? Generally those ED words are just simple past. And now we ask ourselves the important question. We know that the rule is that we'd prefer to keep this in the same tense as long as that's okay, our first verb. We'd like to keep that in the same tense. But we need to ask ourselves, did these two things happen at roughly the same time, or do we need to establish that this thing happened first? Which is it? Do we need to establish this happened first, or is it not important? We do. And the reason why I want to make sure this is clear, because it can be complicated, is that the reason he opted out, it's odd that he opted out even though he had success. It's very important that we know that this success came first and that this opting out came later. It's very important to the whole point of this because they say it's interesting that he chose to go satellite. And for those of you that follow the Howard Stern saga, it is interesting that he chose to go satellite. Okay, so we know that we need to go back from the simple past. What do we use again to do that? What do we use to go back from the past? Aside from a DeLorean? Anybody? The perfect past. Nice. Thanks, Anne-Marie. The past perfect, absolutely. And the past perfect we need to remember is formed with had plus the past participle. Well, the verb here is to have. What is the past participle of to have? What is just a simple kind of past form? It's had, which means we need to say had. Now this is what makes this question somewhat hard. Again, probably about half the class got it right. As it turns out, it is totally legitimate to say had, and it is correct here. Has had would be the present perfect, which does not work with the simple past. You can't go back. I know it sounds awkward, right? And awkward is sort of our favorite word when we're dealing with sentence correction as something to totally ignore. Whenever you find yourself saying in your head, this sounds awkward, you should say, wait a minute. I am not allowed to use that as a criterion for making a decision. Because a lot of things sound awkward that are correct. A lot of things don't sound awkward that are quite wrong. So we don't want to use that. But our rule is very straightforward. We have to add the word had to the past participle of our verb, which is already had, so it's had. So B, what about having had? Having had success, Yeah, this is sort of hard to explain. So progressive tenses are these ing words, right? So like if you say like I am running, and then in this case, the way that these progressive tenses are formed is with a participle, right? This ing form. So you basically use the verb am and a participle, I am running. This is trying to use that participial phrase as well. Having had success, I would say the biggest problem with these, with D&E, is that they lack the though, which we need for meaning here, which I think is the only fundamental problem, to be totally honest. Now, I don't want to be wrong about this. I could look it up to be totally safe. But we definitely need the though, because the whole point we're trying to make is that even though he had success. D is not a fragment, actually, because basically having had success, Howard Stern opted out. So in other words, what we would have is a participial phrase, a modifier, modifying Howard Stern, which is totally correct. It comes right after the comma, which is what we want, right? So that should be fine from that perspective, but we definitely need the though for the meaning to work here. Yeah, that's the best thing that I can say, because I think the participial thing would not actually be a problem. No worries, Nicole. It's a really good question. Okay, any other questions on this one? I see some writing, so I want to make sure. I should also warn you, my mouse just complained that I'm running out of batteries. I have batteries here, but if I freeze up in a second, I'll have to run and get them. But don't worry, I have batteries. Could you briefly define what you mean by participle? Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, Jason. Absolutely. So ing is a little bit complicated because it can be one of two things. Let me move this stuff up here. Can anybody tell me what is the other thing that an ing word could be? Who knows the term? Now that's the other thing that a participle could be here, and you're absolutely right. So participles can be ing or ed words used as adjectives. Okay? Not quite. So nobody quite knows. Okay. So by using it as an adjective, Jason, what I mean is it's a modifier. So do you see how here, if I said having had success, who, right? That's modifying somebody. It would be like running from the police, Dave got tired, right? So running from the police is modifying Dave. We call that a participle. ing words can also be gerunds, so you have to be a little bit careful. Very good, NS, whatever NS stands for. So in other words, the running of the bulls is awesome. The running is a noun. We call that a gerund. So when it's a noun. Okay? Progressive tenses are formed using the participle. So I am running. In this case, it's not a progressive tense. It's just a participial phrase. It's just a participial. Someone asked me, is having case generally wrong here? You know, it's definitely not the cleanest thing I've ever seen. It is, to quote, awkward, but I would say the grammatical problem here is the lack of though. I don't think the GMAT would have given you the option of a correct D and B. Like, they wouldn't have done that because they both would have been justifiable in terms of tense. Okay? Our preference would be for the past perfect, though, based on our rules, that we have a past tense verb and we want to go back in time. So that would still be our preference. Okay? For in dynasty. Participles modify. That's all they do. That's what participles are for. They modify either nouns or verbs. But again, if you want more on that, you can read our sort of whole book on modifiers. I don't want to get too bogged down in just that issue. Okay, very good, you guys. I'm going to put up another question, and I'm going to run and grab a replacement battery. So excuse me if I'm a little longer than minute 15. All right, that's time. Let's get everybody polling in. If you haven't taken our class, you might not know our whole philosophy on this, but on the real test, and by the way, is my volume okay? I just turned it up a little bit. It looked low. Always let me know if there's any problem there. Cool. You always have to poll in on the real test, right? You can't leave anything blank, so you might as well poll in here too. Okay, so here's a sentence that I just made up for us here. And clearly, we've got a verb tense issue, right? Again, this is always going to be your first step when you deal with this stuff. Always identification first. Sorry about that. Is learning, learned, had learned, has learned. Hey, what would we call is learning? What would we call that? Anybody know? I kind of said, sort of subtly, if you remember, what we would call that form. PC. Yeah. Oh, I see. So yeah, some people call it present continuous or present progressive. Yeah, those are both good. Learned is past. Had learned. What's had learned? Whoa! Don't touch the slide, everyone. No slide touching. Past perfect, very good. Past perfect, present perfect, and just simple past, right? So a lot of verb tense change is very obvious, right? This should be very obvious as soon as we look at it. This is a verb tense question. So the thing that makes this question particularly hard is I underlined the whole thing and I changed all of the tenses, right? So like I'm bouncing back and forth. It's hard to look anywhere for context. To be honest, not super common on the real test. This is a very hard question. They don't tend to be this mean when it comes to verb tense and give you no context to go on. But that's what we've got. And what happened is we all got down to B or E pretty quickly. And if I put up the polling results here, B and E, you can see are evenly split pretty much. B has a little bit of an edge. So real quickly, clearly A is wrong from a meaning perspective, right? There's no actual problems here, just the meaning. It's not a future war, right, where Europe will be reduced to rubble. Hopefully not going to happen. In C, we've got had learned about the war in which Europe was reduced. What would be the problem there? Can anybody put it into words? What's the problem with C? Nobody picked it, so you all agree. Not quite parallelism. Yeah, he learned before the war had happened. Very good. Yeah, the tenses are backwards. Exactly. These seem to be going the wrong way because the learning shouldn't happen before the war. It doesn't make any sense, right? And then D is pretty silly. Has learned about the war, must have been. The only trick with D is that D actually has the two most similar tenses, right? It's got present perfect, but that's not correct here. And Amory, just a little side note here. Be careful with parallelism and verb tense. Parallelism does not require that you have verbs in the same tense. For example, I could say, yesterday I went to the store, and tomorrow I will go again. Notice went, past tense, will go, future tense, but there's no problem here. So you don't really need to worry about parallelism when you're dealing with verb tense unless you see parallel markers that are particularly important. And also you need to pay attention to context words like yesterday or tomorrow. Yeah, no worries. No, it's a really, really important thing to note. Okay, so we come down to B or E, and it's a very difficult decision. We have had been reduced, was reduced to rubble. And now, does anyone want to make the case? So in the chat window, like at least one B person, one E person, let's get a few people writing. Tell me why you went with the one you went with. Sorry, this exercise, but I want to hear what people said. Yeah, Jason, you can. You can go from past to future in one sentence. In the way I wrote. It's not easy. Notice I had to use yesterday and tomorrow to do it. Meaning issue, no link between actions in B, passive. Everything's passive here. So was reduced as passive, had been reduced as passive. So they're both passive. No link between actions. Timing. Okay, cool. So here's what I wanted to hear. No, I'm Tommy. This is Timmy, Daria. Come on. So here's what I wanted to hear, because this is a tough question. That's why I put it on here. Okay, so nobody stress out. Okay, it's meant to be a tough question. Timmy learned about the war in which much of Europe had been reduced to rubble. Now, the way a lot of people read this is like, okay, I learned a rule. This reduction happened before the learning happened, so I'm supposed to use the past perfect. And in E, it's looking like the two are happening at the same time because these are both the simple past. Give me a smiley face if that was your logic and you ended up picking B. I think that's kind of what your logic ought to be if you picked B. There's a problem with this. And I'll go back here where it says consistency is best, only change tenses when you have to. In this example, because of the way it worked, if I said, though he had success broadcasting, it has not clearly established the order between these two. And we need to know, because the whole point we're trying to make, particularly with this though, is we're trying to make a point like, even though back in the day he had this success, later on he chose to leave. In this sentence, there's no confusion about the time issue between these two. And so the rule that ends up trumping is the rule that we prefer consistency. Yes, I know this is annoying as heck. But the point is this: if I say, here's an example, okay? Let me put my own slide in here. If I say, I went to the store and bought a chicken, or I went to the store, bought a chicken, and came home. In my second example here, my second one is better. I'll put it center stage. Which action happened last? Clearly the coming home. Clearly the coming home, right? And yet, went is past, bought is past, and came is past. They're all past. But it's not like I need to say, I had gone to the store, had bought a chicken, and came home just to establish that these two things happened first. It is clear. The action here is clear. I don't need to use the past perfect to establish the order of events here. And the same thing is true in this sentence. Timmy learned about the war. There was a war, and in that war, much of Europe was reduced to rubble. There is no possibility of confusion here. I know this is frustrating. It's why I chose to use this question. I could have just given you easy ones. You'd all be happy. You'd feel brilliant. Instead, I choose to punish you. But does it make sense? I think this example right here truly is what kind of clarifies this. We don't always need to establish the order of events. Yeah, it's exactly Dinesh, and Dinesh knows our strategy guides inside and out. He's absolutely right. I actually used the dinosaur question to formulate this one, though I had to write all of the 5 things. So it is subtle, but what I will argue always with sentence correction, no worries, Jason, thanks, is that it's not subjective. Okay, so in case I always want to make sure I'm not trying to make sure it's clear. Subjective means like, oh, it's just kind of what sounds good to you, and objective means it's actually better. This is not subjective. The fact is that we don't need to establish the order here. I will also note to you that we weren't really given. Well, let me see. Even though he had, I take it back. C would have given us the option to say at the same time. But we want to establish this order of events here, and so that's what it comes down to. Any other questions about that? Again, like I said, it's meant to be difficult and subtle, but you know, the rest of verb tense ought to be fairly easy. How would we know when we need to establish order? Yeah, sorry, so E is the answer here. Absolutely, E is the answer. How would we know when we need to establish order? As a rule, you know, I'm not quite sure how to give it to you, Amory, as like one sentence. I guess what I would say here is that this sounds very wishy-washy. I wish it weren't. But what I would say is if the meaning of the sentence inherently implies the order, such as this one, or this one, because if you're learning about a war, it had to have already happened. It just doesn't make any sense to learn about a war that hasn't happened yet. Like, obviously it happened before. If the meaning of the sentence inherently implies the order of events, you don't need to use it. Think of it this way. You use past perfect when it isn't inherently clear in the sentence what happened when. What happened when, okay? That's the best I can say. And I know that that isn't a universal panacea for this problem, but it's the best there is. So the answer is E. Good work to those who got it. Those who picked B, again, don't stress overly much. Okay, let's see. Do I have any more of these? Yes, cool. I think I have one more for us to do. So let's do this last one. So this thing's getting moved around. I'm going to take out the underlines entirely. It's would to the end is what's underlined. All right. So we are back in. Okay, so a lot of people haven't pulled in. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds here. I want people to pull in here. Okay. Yeah, I can throw up the polling results. I definitely don't like to do it while people are polling in because it tends to really affect what people type. So B was the favorite, followed by D, and then a little bit of A and E. Okay, fair enough. So B and D being our split once again. So sorry about the underline, you guys. I guess it's appearing for people differently, so I won't bother with underlines anymore. But let's take a look at our splits. Our first split here is would versus took. Would, took, would, took. Anyone know what would is? What is would? It has a name. Starts with a K. Nice, Jason knows. Conditional. That's called a conditional. Whenever you use would in front of a verb, it's a conditional. So it's sort of the past of will, but you can't really have the past of will. Because, do you see what I mean? Like, I will go. See what I mean? Like, what do you mean I will? It's not really the past of will, I guess what I would say. It's the conditional. I would go if, right? There's an understood conditionalness to it, right? So the first question we have is when do we use the conditional? Does anyone know when we use the conditional? We sometimes use it with it. We use if then, but that's sort of separate. Anyone know when? So this is a little bit weird, but I'm just gonna put it to you the way it's got to be put. You use the conditional when you want to talk about the future from the perspective of the past. Ugh, I know, but that's what it's for. So let's take a look here. We clearly have some verb tense issues, even if not this would, because this would thing, guys, somebody's moving this box again. Let's not move the box. Okay. So we've got this would, took thing, but that's not really verb tense per se. It's a little bit confusing. But we have this split at the end, had been, was, right? Don't move the box, right? We have this split at the end, so we know there is a verb tense issue here. So where are some other verbs that we can use for context? What do we have? Launched, yeah, that's all we've got, right? I will attempt to highlight here. Hopefully that's showing up for everyone on the word launched. The Philological Society launched its effort to create this dictionary, semicolon. So it's kind of outside, no moving the box. Please don't move the box. Right, so we've got this, though it is technically in another clause. So in some ways this stands alone, though we have this notion of pastness. Although the project took more, it was born. Does this establish our difference? Is this the way, are we looking at the future from the past here? I guess I'll ask it that way. Are we looking at the future from the past here or not? We are indeed. We are indeed. Because this is past, we're already in the past tense. So although the project would take more than 60 years. So in other words, let's think about the meaning as well. The point we're trying to make is even though this thing wasn't going to finish for a long time, it was at least started, right? That's kind of our overall meaning. So although the project would take more than 60 years from that past moment, so 60 years in the future, right? So we do need the would. Right, we do need the would, because without the would, we don't establish this difference, right? Although the project took more than 60 years, it was born. What do you mean, although it took more than 60 years, it was born? Those two things aren't in conflict. The word although creates conflict. Watch, like, although I don't have any money, I want a new car. See how there's conflict there? Like, I don't have any money, but I want this new car. That's what although is for. But if I don't have the would, the conditional, if I just say, although it took 60 years, it was born, I don't establish that conflict at all, right? So I need the would here, okay? I need the would. So I can get rid of B, get rid of E, and then from there pretty much everybody got the right answer. But somebody tell me, why is it that I prefer was to had been or was being? You are not talking about further past events. Very good. Not passive active. I want to be very careful here. Unless you're talking about being. being is just always wrong, right? We hate being. Being is wrong 98% of the time. Be careful overusing passive active as an issue, though being is always crappy, and it has a passivity to it. But yeah, the reason, being is just always terrible. It really is. But Jason was on top of the reason here. If we want to use had been, we want to go back before a past action. Would take is not the past. Right? Would take is not the past. So it doesn't make any sense to go back before it. We are very happy with was. Yeah, being's pretty crappy, unless it's human being. So the answer is D. Very good work, D people. Is everybody happy here? Give me a smiley face. I actually have one more sentence. Do we want one more sentence or do we want to move on? Give me a smiley face if you want one more. And a frowny face if you don't. Okay, everybody wants one more. Okay, cool. Glad to hear it. One more. All right, here we are. That's time, everybody. Pull in, please, please. Still missing 5 or 6 people. Come on in, join the party. It's warm. Cliff, Mythalesh, Sammy, Shannon, Stephanie. Okay, so we've got a bit of a distribution here. A is our favorite. Oh, wow, look at that. A, B, C, D, E. It just walks on down. But certainly no more than a third of the class liking anything. So a confusing question, tough question, right? Where is our split that's going to tell us that this is verb tense? What verb? Be careful. No one has yet actually said it quite yet. Had believed. So I want to make this really clear, you guys. You won't get, I mean, I know a lot of you did it, by the way. But you won't get good at sentence correction until you're able to very quickly recognize the category. And today it's kind of easy because you know I'm talking about verb tense, but it won't always be so easy, right? So we've got this had believed, believed. As soon as you see just that, you know that you've got a verb tense issue because you've already got 2 different ones, right? So we know we've got verb tense. We need a context verb. Where is our context verb? Proved. Very good. So we've got past tense. Now tell me, you guys, again, sorry if the box is moving, and sorry if the boxes and lines don't quite line up, but proved is what I'm trying to put in a box here. So proved, simple past. Did this proving happen before, after, or at the same time as the belief? It absolutely has to happen after. So we would prefer for this verb to be in the past perfect. Now, a case can be made for the simple past here because of the word until. The word until does establish the time for you. Do you all see what I mean? That because of until, we already sort of know what comes first, right? So I would argue that a case can be made to maintain the simple past here. Luckily, this sentence does some other stuff to make things clearer for you. But if we start with A, we've got the past perfect, and then we've got sort of a happy modifier and imaginary substance modifying phlogiston. I don't quite see any problems there. Can anyone tell me something that's problematic with B? It's a little bit subtle. So even if you like the verb tense, there's a subtle problem there. No, it's just fine. It's just fine. It's just the imaginary substance. Oh, I see what you're trying to say. And it's. Okay, so we have a parallelism issue. We have a parallelism issue. So again, for those of you that haven't been through our class, I can give you sort of an idea. And is a parallel marker. And whatever comes right after it needs to be paralleled somewhere else in the sentence. So we have, it was a substance and its properties. It's a little bit iffy. It's a little bit iffy. However, there's a bigger problem. Stop with the active versus passive. No more active versus passive is allowed to be mentioned in this room. I'm half joking, but be careful. It's a very subtle issue, and it is almost never the reason to get rid of an answer choice. So I'd really like to focus on other grammatical issues. There's actually a bigger issue here, and this is what I want you to notice. Yeah, Jason, it's preferable, but passive is not wrong. So you can't cross something off just for being passive. There will generally always be some other issue. I would say 98% of the time. And the issue is this. Many scientists believe that phlogiston was an imaginary substance. Wait a minute. Is that what scientists believed? What did the scientists believe? What did the scientists actually believe? Yeah, Amory, absolutely. They believed that combustion released phlogiston. Clearly, the scientists didn't think it was imaginary. They believed in it. That's the whole point, right? They believed in it. So B, like, totally screws up the meaning. But you see how easy that is to miss when it's fairly straightforward? So always be on the lookout. Don't leave meaning and context out of here. Let's look at C. Many scientists, how about C? Do y'all see that C does the same thing? Until he proved otherwise, phlogiston was imaginary. No, it was still imaginary, right? It wasn't that it was imaginary until he proved otherwise and it became real. Do y'all see what I mean? Another big meaning issue there with C. See, people, does that make sense? Don't let me steamroll over you if you have no idea what I'm talking about. And same goes for B, people. Definitely let me know. Okay, cool. Now we've got D. Until proved otherwise, phlogiston was believed by scientists to be released by combustion. Okay, I'm going to leave that one around for now. I'm going to leave it around because B was sort of the other kind of, or D was the next favorite after what I've gotten rid of. And then finally, until he proved otherwise, many scientists had believed that phlogiston was released by combustion and was an imaginary substance whose properties were not fully understood. What's wrong with E? No, well, not a lot of E picking in the room. What don't we like about E? So this one, change meaning, not a sentence fragment, definitely not a sentence fragment. What I would say here, and this is a tougher question, is that the biggest problem with E is it is so unbelievably weird. Oh yeah, and it does make it believe that the scientists believe it was imaginary. Amory, you're absolutely right. I missed that again. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It says that the scientists believed it was imaginary, just like B did. So it makes that mistake. It's also incredibly badly written. I mean, it's got modifier upon modifier going on, and it also has a lot of passive verbs for what it's worth, though notice that there are other bigger problems than the passive verbs. So we come down to A and D, and for here, we do prefer the past perfect tense here if we can help it, but I would say in this case, and again, I want to make sure we get at least one of them, it is very unnecessary to go passive here. Phlogiston was believed by scientists is a very ugly way to say many scientists believed, right, to go there. And it was also to be released by combustion. So you see how we go by scientists to be released by combustion. It is a very, very ugly way to write this. And it wasn't a particularly popular answer in the room, by the way. But it's worth noting that you can sort of cross this off for two reasons. You could prefer the past perfect, though I'm going to go out on a limb, even though our own, this is one of our questions, and our explanation does say you want the past perfect here. But I would slightly disagree. I think you could get away with the simple past, and yet this is just not a nice way to word it. A is very clearly better written from that. So A is the answer here. It was the most popular answer in the room. Very good. Are there any questions on this? Or shall we move forward into probability? People keep moving the box into my box. I give up. Okay, very good work, you guys. I hope that was helpful on verb tense. I don't actually want to do any more. I think we should move on. Is that okay? Everyone give me a smiley face if it's okay. I don't want to talk about verb tense the whole time. That would be a bit of a shame. Okay, yeah. So let's get a little bit of probability. So first, an intro to probability. The first thing to note, probability is inherently difficult, by which I mean inherently it is not so important. So if you're trying to break 700, you might want to be able to do a little bit of probability. If you're trying to break 750, you've got to be great at probability. But if you're trying to get a 650 or even just a 700, probability is not super important for you. And I want to make sure that that's clear. It is an inherently difficult category. Like combinatorics, it is just harder. And the only way to be good at it is to be flexible as opposed to formulaic. Formulas are crappy. But there are some basic rules that you want to know about probability. First, probabilities can't be bigger than 1. right? Second, the answer to probability will be outcomes you want over total outcomes. This allows you to solve for a lot of probability questions by doing two separate combinatorics questions, one for the numerator and one for the denominator. Now, if you suck at combinatorics too, well, then you're in trouble. You might want to get better at combinatorics, but that is one way that you can go at these. Another thing to mention, and a lot of people asked about this, is that let me just do my little sort of step-by-step. And this really only works for very basic probability questions, but I'll throw it out there. First, you find the number of events, the number of different things you need to have happen. Then, find the individual probability for each event. Then, if you need all of them to happen, that's an AND question, multiply. If you need any one of them to happen, that's an OR question, you add. Those are the very basic rules, but like I said, if you're not flexible, nothing's going to do it for you. Probability is always going to throw some new monkey wrench into things, so you have to be very, very flexible. But these are some good basic rules. So I've thrown up a question here. I'll give you all maybe a minute 15 to try to do it. All right, so missing more than half the class, so everybody pull in with something. Just guess, pick whichever one looks best to you. So again, there might have been some confusion here in the writing. I just wrote this question this morning, so if there was any subtlety in that didn't come through, I apologize. But we definitely have a lot of variety. A and E tied for the lead, but B, C, and D all have some choices. I call that a full house when it happens. So the probability of rolling a 6 on one throw, well, only one event, right? It's one throw. And what are the odds of rolling a 6? Somebody tell me, what are the odds of rolling a 6? 1 out of 6. Very good. Okay. And now we need to roll any number twice in a row. Okay, so 2 events. Notice I'm putting these slots up. I do it that way. Okay, well, what do I need to have happen on the first throw if I need to get the same number twice in a row? So a lot of people are saying 1/6, but that's not actually true because I could get anything on the first throw, right? It's actually all about what happens on the second throw. I'm allowed to get anything on the first throw, so really I can just put a 1 there. 1 stands in for 100%. In other words, anything I throw on the first throw is still cool. I'm still good, right? I'm still good to go. But now, once I've rolled something, what are my odds of getting it again the second time? 1 out of 6, right? So if I roll a 2 the first time, now there's a 1 out of 6 chance I'm going to roll a 2 a second time. Now I need both of these things to happen, so I'm going to multiply. And I know I'm going to multiply, by the way, because if I were to add, I would get something bigger than 1, which isn't allowed to happen with probability. So it just can't be true. So I just multiply and I get 1/6. The answer here is indeed 0. There is no difference between those two possibilities. Questions, concerns? I didn't expect that to be so troubling, so let me know if there's anything I can do to clear it up. See a little bit of writing, so I'll hold. Good stuff. All right, cool. It's good stuff. That's good. So what about a denominator for the first throw? Well, you don't need a denominator. I mean, technically it would be 6 out of 6, I suppose. The second time, okay, so here's how you have to think about probability. You have to think like, okay, once I get to the second spot, something has already been picked for the first slot. So in other words, if I want to roll 2 things in a row, it does not matter what I roll on the first throw. It does not matter what I roll on the first throw. So anything is fine. So 6 out of 6, all of the options are good. But once I've thrown something, I have to throw that same thing again. So if it's a 2, I need to roll a 2 the second time. If it's a 3, I need to roll a 3 the second time. And that's 1 out of 6. Here, we multiply when we need all of the things to happen. So if you're okay, so if I say there's a 1/3 chance it will rain and a 1/3 chance it will snow, what are the odds that it will rain or snow? Now I know this is an incredibly stupid question, but the answer would just be 1/3 plus 1/3. because I'm happy with either of those things happening, hence the or, right? In this case, though, it's not an or. I need both of these to happen. I need to roll the first die, and it doesn't matter what I get. That's why it's just 100. And then I need to match it with my 1 out of 6, right? Okay, cool. I have more questions that maybe will help clarify these things, so I'm going to move us along. Let's try this one. I'll give you 30 more seconds. You know what? So many people are writing publicly that just write publicly in the chat window. That's fine. You can do it publicly. All right, so very good work. A lot of people got the right answer. A lot of people did not. This is a special kind of question, and I got asked about this, and people asked me to talk about this issue specifically. And it's this at least thing. At least is a very, very special trigger when it comes to probability. And the reason why is that it's actually very difficult to solve this directly. Because if I needed to work out the probability of getting at least 1/6, well, do you all see that I would need to take the odds of getting 1/6 and add that to the odds of getting 2 6s and add that to the odds of getting all 3 6s. I would need to take all of those different pieces and add them up. It would be very, very time consuming. Can everyone hear me okay? Daria, can everyone hear me? Gotcha. Daria, I will write to Daria here. Oh, you can hear but. Doesn't seem like anything's gone wrong here, so it might be on your end. I don't see any lag, so you might need to reboot. Or something like that. My apologies. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Daria. So at least it's kind of complicated. And the big rule to know here, I didn't put it on my intro to probability slide, but I actually think I'll add it here because it's so important. The probability of something happening plus the probability of something not happening equals 1. So the probability that I will go home and find Jessica Alba waiting for me plus the probability that I will go home and not find Jessica Alba waiting for me is 100%. I have a 100% chance of finding Jessica Alba waiting for me when I go home. Not that anybody remembers who Jessica Alba is. Sorry about the beeping noise. Amory does maybe. All right, thanks, Amory. So we need a trick to deal with these at least questions because it's so hard to figure out the actual answer, right? And the trick, as a lot of people saw, is that we can take the opposite of at least 1. So what is the opposite of at least 1/6? What is the opposite of at least 1/6? What is the only other thing that could happen? Exactly. No 6s. Does this make sense to everyone? The probability of at least 1/6 plus the probability of no 6s equals 1, right? Those are the only two things that can happen. Either you get at least 1/6 or you get none of them, right? Getting all 6s is still at least 1. And hopefully you can see why this is so awesome, because solving for no 6s is actually pretty easy, right? It's actually pretty easy. So let's try it. How many events would we have here? How many events using my method? 3, very good, Adi, absolutely, and a bunch of other people. We've got 3 events, and I want no 6s. So what are the odds that I will not get a 6 on the first roll? 5 out of 6, very good. What are the odds that I won't get a 6 on the second roll? It's still 5 out of 6, nothing changes, it's 5 out of 6 all the way across. Now, is this an and question or an or question? Do I need to multiply or add? I definitely need to multiply. And remember, you guys, if I added here, I would get something bigger than 1. I would get 15/6. Probabilities can never get bigger than 1. So if you ever get something bigger than 1, you have screwed up somewhere along the line. And here, you guys, one more time is the reason I need to multiply. Here's the difference, right? When it's an and question, you multiply. When it's an or question, you add. If I want to get no 6s at all, I need the first roll to be a not 6, and the second roll, and the third roll. Multiply, multiply. It should get smaller and smaller. Now, a lot of people wussed out on this math. You should all know your cubes up to 6, memorize them at least, so you should know right away that this is 125 2/16, because it's just 5 cubed over 6 cubed, okay? And once I've got that, is that the answer? You'd have to be careful, right? I would have definitely put this in the answer choices if I had written answer choices. Kashif, what do I need to do? This is 1, 0, minus, because she says subtract from 1, absolutely. Do you all see that if I want to get the probability of at least 1/6, I need to move this over here and subtract it from 1 to get at least 1/6. So 1 minus 125 2/16 is, as many people said, 91 2/16, which, by the way, is not an unrealistic answer. I know it isn't pretty, but it isn't particularly difficult to find if you know your cubes, so this would not be sort of too weird to be a real answer. That's very realistic. You know, I always get asked that question, what if it were at least 2 6s? It would be a much harder question, so hard, in fact, that I've never seen them do it. Sometimes they do something like exactly 2, which is also hard, but it's easier, but I've never seen them do at least 2. They always do at least 1 so that you can use this trick, because you can't use this trick if it says at least 2. Is it safe to say when they ask at least we should multiply and not add? You know, Omri, I would say nothing is safe, but yes. How's that for an answer? So remember how I said, like, to be good at probability you need to be really flexible? That's because they can do anything, and they're always doing it. So for people like me, I'm not a math genius, but I score well enough on this test that I get sort of all, you know, 770 level questions. They do everything. You know, you have to be ready for any bit of weirdness. But as a generalization, yeah, most of the time you're going to multiply here. In fact, most of the time in probability you multiply. It's fairly rare that you add. So is it safe to say just make the fraction 2/16 2/16 instead of 1? I definitely wouldn't do that, because then you have to multiply 2/16 the whole way through or something. So I wouldn't change it to 2/16 until you have to. It's because you do 6 cubed. But I might not quite understand your question, Nicole, if that's clear. So hold on, Thacker wrote probability of 1/6 plus the probability of, but that's not the probability of 2/6. You have to be careful, right? That's not the probability of 2 6s. That's the probability of 2 anythings. So it's a little bit, yeah. It's a probability. So I don't know if that worked, Thacker. I don't think it would work, to be honest, but I could be wrong. No, it did not. Well, I'm glad for at least that. I don't think that would work because, like I said, 1/6 times 1/6 times 5/6 is not the probability of 2 6s. It's the probability of 2 somethings and then a third sort of something. So it doesn't quite work as clearly. There's probably a way to add up something, but yeah. Okay, I want to move along. We're asking a lot of detailed questions, but this is clearly the cleanest way to do this question. This is by far the way you should do it. So let's try a couple more. Let's start with this one up here. I'll give you 2 minutes again. And thanks, Dinesh, for answering that for me. Cool, so thanks everyone for writing to me. It's okay, I guess we'll just leave everything public. People are still having enough variation that I'm not too stressed about it. So we've got some 17/20ths, some 32.5s, some 3/20ths, some 13/40s. We got a lot of variation here. So this is a question that kind of brings together the two things that I've been talking about, so you have to be a little bit careful. So there's a 25% chance of hail and a 10% chance of rain. So we know straight away that there's a 35% chance that squash is not going to happen, right? So we had a 65% chance of squashiness, right? Everyone okay? That's kind of what was left after the inclement weather issue. Then from there, something else happens. If the weather's good, there's a 50% chance that my mom will come down from Seattle to bother me, in which case I won't play either. So there are two ways that we can think about this. I think the easiest way is to think about this whole thing actually as a two-parter. So the first thing that could happen is that the weather would be good. And what are the odds that the weather's good? Well, they're 65, right? 65% or 0.65 or however you would want to deal with that. But then there's a 0.5 chance, even if the weather's good, that the mom's going to come. So what are the odds that the mom will come? That's my question for you. Yeah, it's 32.5%. right? It's half of this. And again, if you need to work out why that is, we're just doing 1/2 times 0.65, which would be 0.325, which translates to 32.5%. So there's a 32.5% that the mom will come anyway, and in addition, there is now a 32.5% chance that squash will get played. So in other words, you could add it this way: 35% chance bad weather, 32.5% chance mom comes. And that adds up to 67.5% no squash, or 32.5% squash, which is the answer. I don't know if that's the same as 13/40. I believe it is. Yeah, 13/40 is the same. So if you got 13/40, that is the same thing, just translated into fractions, because a 40th is 2.5%. So any questions about this? A lot of people got the right answer. I'm very happy to see. Yeah, it is as simple as multiplying 0.65 times 0.5, Girish. I'm trying to show you kind of the whole thing in case you want to, because there are two ways to look at it. Okay, so we've got people who are lost. So basically, let's think about it this way. There are two ways that squash could get played, right? There are two ways. I shouldn't even say it that way. Really, there's only one way. For squash to get played, two things have to happen. The weather has to be good, and the mom has to not come down, right? The weather has to be good, and the mom has to not come down. I need both of those things to happen if I'm going to play squash, so it becomes an and question. I need both of them to happen, and that equals 32.5%. That would be the simplest way to look at it. I just wanted to show you the other way. You know, Amory, I wouldn't say you should need a chart here. This isn't like an overlapping sets question. It's just probability. I know it looks kind of complicated, but it really is this simple. For squash to happen, I need this to happen, and I need this to happen. This isn't an at least question, Dinesh, so it doesn't say at least. If it doesn't say at least, it's not an at least question. I mean, you could solve for the opposite of this, the odds that squash won't happen, but there's no good reason to do that. Any other questions? I see a little bit of writing, so I'll pause. You added 10 and 25. Ah, right. Because really the question is about any inclement weather. I separated it just to make things a little bit more complicated. But both of them are inclement. So if it hails, that's bad. If it rains, that's bad. Yeah, exactly, Jason. That's exactly it. So everyone look at Jason's comment. Exactly. There's no reason to solve for the opposite here. Just solve for the squashiness. Mithalesh, we have a probability of weather to be good is 0.65. Squash will be played only if weather is good, and probability for mom, hence good weather and mom don't come. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Mithalesh. I added them, but as fractions, got wrong answer. Maybe you did your addition wrong? You mean you added the 1/4 and the 1/10, and then you can't add the 50% to that, because keep in mind this is a subset. So there's only a 50% chance when the weather is good, not overall, right? So it's not like at the beginning of the day there's just a 50% chance that the mom will come down. Only a 50% chance if the weather's good, which is only going to happen 65% of the time. So that might have been the issue, or it could have been arithmetical. Yeah. What if the chance were, subjunctive, what if the chance were 50% irrespective of the weather? If it were 50% irrespective of the weather, it would be a much more, it would just be, you wouldn't want them to be sort of separated on its own, because then you wouldn't really be able to work out the overlap. I'm not sure that would be directly soluble. Because you wouldn't know if there was any connection. Otherwise, you could just add them. If you knew that like there's a 50% chance that mom and a 25% chance of hail. What I mean to say is that if it hails, it can't rain, at least in this definition of things. I realize that maybe possibly it could, and it might have been helpful for me to have established that. So if you thought it was possible to both hail and rain, and you got the question wrong, then that is totally my fault. I had hoped that it would be clear that sort of it would either hail or rain. So you would need it to be like it will hail or rain, or the mom will come down, because if there's overlap, you can't work it out. Okay? Fair enough? Everybody okay on that one? I'm going to move us along. One more probability question. It's a little bit harder. Private message if you remember, or not, whatever. Okay, very good. So I wanted to do this just with a little bit of a trick in there, just to make sure people weren't overthinking these, and a fair number of people saw it. I'm very happy to see it. If it's certain on day 4, it's going to hail on one day. So I'm glad you all saw that. I want to make a little change now, but very good work if you saw that. But let's make it slightly more interesting this time around. Okay, so let's try one more time like this. Are you all happy that I made you do such horrific math? I thought we deserved at least one, just for all of you that wussed out on that last question and wouldn't solve for 5 cubed. Wahahaha. Either way, I'm very impressed with those of you who did it, so let's talk through it real quick. So hopefully you all notice that this is an at least question yet again. And it is a horrifying one. Some horrible things had happened. And no, this is not realistic math, though a lot of you were able to get it done in 2 minutes, proving that it is possible. Obviously, we can't solve for the probability of this in any way other than the 1 minus trick. So we are going to solve for what? What are we actually going to solve for if we can't get at least 1 day? No days. No days at all. So we've got 5 events. What is the probability that it will not hail on the first day? Nice, Jason. That is exactly it. 4/5, 3/5, 2/5, right? We just have to take the opposite of all of these. It goes in order like this. And then we're going to multiply that out. As many of you saw, the basement, the denominator will be 31/25, or 5 to the 5th. And the top will be 4 times 3 is 12, times 2 is 24, times 3 is 72, times 4 is 290. So it should be 290 over 31/25, and then we subtract that. I hope I'm not mistaken, but that will not put me on the same page as a lot of people. Did I screw up in some way? 72 times 4. Oh, it's 2. Yes, I did. Thank you. It's 288, right? Did anyone correct me yet? Yes, thank you very much, you guys. Absolutely, it is 288, which is how we will get to the same thing that everyone has on here, which is 2837, I believe, when we subtract this from 1. Or, Nicole, now that I understand what your actual question was, yes, we just translate this into 31/25, so we get 2837 over 31/25. That should be what we get when we subtract it. Again, right, it looked really complicated, but fairly conceivable within 2 minutes, right? So that's it for me. Any questions on this particular question? Did this help for the at least stuff? Can we do a data sufficiency probability problem after this? Jason, I could try to make one up here. Why don't I do this? We clearly don't have time to get through another lesson. So I'm just going to pop us back, and I'm just going to give you 2 verb tense questions in a row, give you 2.5 minutes to look at them. And don't worry about pulling in answers to either just yet. Just keep track of them, and I'll try to write a question. I think someone just ended the time early, right? That wasn't 2.5 minutes. It was? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so just pull in for the first one. Everybody just pull in A, B, C, D, E for the first question here. Just up with the letters, as usual. That happened in the GMAT with me. That wasn't 2.5 minutes. Who am I? Okay, cool. So I'm still missing like half the room. So pull in some kind of answer up here. So here we've got will, had, would, would. What is would again? What do we call that? Conditional, conditional. Jason's going to put it in tiny pieces. Thanks, man. Super useful. So do we need the conditional here? Yeah, can anyone explain why? Why do we need it? In the future. So we are sort of getting to the future from the past, like we said, right? We're trying to make a decision about the future, but it's not definite. It is conditional. One thing I want to say quickly, Jason asked me earlier, I thought you couldn't go from the past to the future in a sentence, and I had that example, you know, yesterday I went to the store and tomorrow I will go again, and I said, look, you can. But notice that in order to make that sentence work, I had to use yesterday and tomorrow. In this sentence, I don't have yesterday or tomorrow, right? I don't have the same games going on. And so I can't do that here, because the other favorite answer for most people here is clearly A. It will try. The commissioner said that the government will try to prevent the outbreak from recurring. But the issue is that I was in the past, he said, and I don't want to just jump to the future. I don't. It's too big a jump without those helper words, tomorrow, yesterday, whatever. What's much better is the conditional. The conditional is not strictly tensed, right? It doesn't really have a tense. I would try, right? That could be like, he would try if he could. It's just conditional tense. That's what it is. Right? So like that it would try to prevent the outbreak. We want to stay there. We don't want to jump to the future tense. Okay? And that's the reason there, not a lot of B, C, and E. The health commissioner said the government had implemented strict measures and it had tried to prevent the outbreak. You can't had try in the future. So those of you who picked C, there were a few C people in the room. Remember that had tried is past perfect. It should be happening way in the past and be done. So it's not done if you're going to try it in the future. So that's why C is wrong. And then there wasn't a lot of B or D in the room. You can't tried to do it in the future either. That's why we can't use any past, right? Or even this kind of present perfect-y conditional form. So is everybody cool with that? It comes down to A and E, and we don't want to jump to the future here. It's conditional because it's about what's going to happen in the future, and there's a condition. This won't necessarily work. It's conditional. It may work, it may not, right? It would try. It would try to do it, right? Not that it will try. So that's the reasoning there. I hope that that's helpful. The bigger reason, just back her one more time, is that we don't want to jump to the future from the past like this. There's no good reason to do it. We're much better using what is effectively the conditional present. Present. It would try. Like right now, it will try to not keep it happening in the future. So that or no, that doesn't matter. Said that the government will. So the government had implemented, and yeah, I mean, we do want the that. We do want the that. That is a little bit confusing because I can say like, I propose that you go to the store and buy some chicken. I propose that you go to the store and that you buy some chicken. They're both kind of okay. In hypothetical situation, we use conditional, yeah. This isn't a hypothetical situation, right? We can eliminate E due to what? I'm not sure what you mean. E is the answer. Yeah, E is the answer, you guys. Sorry if that wasn't clear. We use would when we talk about the past. You don't say like, he said that I will go to the store, because I wish I could explain it better. The said is in the past. You could say he says that I will go to the store because it's now into the future, right? So like he says that I will go. That's okay because we're going present, and then forward from present is the future. But forward from past is not the future. He said that I would go is what's correct there. So again, I hope that's clear. If not, we are running out of time, so that's the reasoning. And then the answer to the last one, sorry, I need to jump. As I said, I need to go at 6 because I immediately teach more at 6. The answer is, again, E. Rust can deteriorate a steel pipe to such an extent that it will snap easily. We do want the future. And the bigger issue here between these other ones is the was and were. This is the subjunctive. thought we might want to look at one subjunctive. Whenever you say sort of as though or if, I actually corrected someone on this in the chat window, you go with were. Were is the subjunctive form. Even though it's singular, were is the subjunctive that we use with conditional structures, such as if it were, as though it were. Why not is? Yeah, the answer is E. Why not is? I don't actually see is anywhere. Oh, as though it is a twig, because that's not subjunctive. You have to use the subjunctive with a conditional. As if it were, that's not real. That's basically hypothetical. It's a conditional. It's just like as if, as though. So we have to use were, which is a subjunctive form, and you can look that up in your book exactly because it's not real. Okay, you guys, I'm really sorry to have to run like this. I love to stick around and answer questions. Typically, I just have more stuff, more teaching to do. You identify subjunctive with those conditional terms like if or as though. There aren't actually a lot of them, as if. You can look them all up in the book. But please feel free to email me. I will pop that back up right here. If you have follow-up questions, email me there. I would be very happy to answer some basic questions. And the recording of this should be made available at some point in the next few days. I don't actually know how they do that. I'm not in charge of the tech. I will not, it'll still be Ron most of the time. I will always be Ron's fill-in, it looks like, whenever Ron can't do it. But there you go. It's been very nice being with you. You've actually been a lot of fun, a lot of good questions. Hope that was helpful. And I do have to run, so I'll be closing up the room. But if you have any more questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, have a lovely evening. I think it's once a month, Mithalesh. I don't think it's once a week. So you'll have to look it up. But I'm pretty sure it's just, what is it, the third Thursday of every month. Oh, it's bi-weekly, every other month? Yeah, so call Student Services or look on the website. They'll know for sure. Okay, cool. Have a good night, everybody. Bye. Or a good day if it's 5 a.m. Bye.